Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, the podcast where we bring you inside the world of joint ventures, strategic partnerships, and powerful collaborations. Each episode, you'll dive into conversations with top entrepreneurs, visionaries, and business leaders, unlocking the secrets to building profitable relationships that drive growth and success. Whether you're looking to expand your network, find new referral partners, or scale your business, you're in the right place. Let's get started.
Welcome to Partnerships for Profit, presented by LeDuc Entertainment. Today, we are joined by Rachel Allums, the founder and principal attorney at Allums Law. Rachel, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Adrian. Great to be here.
Can you start off by telling us a little bit about yourself and a little bit about Allums Law?
Sure, I would love to. So I am an attorney, founded this firm in the Southern California, San Diego area about 5 years ago. I am a solo entrepreneur here in this area, and I practice mainly in trust, estates, and probate law. I came to law in an unusual way. I sort of call myself a unicorn, so to speak. So I actually grew up in the area of law since I was 18 years old. I was a legal secretary for years, became a paralegal for over 20 years, and then went on to become a licensed attorney, which is a very unusual route. I also did not attend traditional law school. Instead, I used a little known pathway to the bar through the state of California bar, which allows you to study with a mentor attorney or in a judge's chambers for a 4-year period. It's sort of like kind of described to people law school, homeschool for law school version. And that allowed me to continue working in a law firm as a law firm manager and paralegal while I was getting my licensure, and passed the bar 2019 and opened my firm in 2020. So it's been quite a journey, an interesting ride. I did it sort of backwards from the way most lawyers come to their firm, which actually for me has been amazing because I was able to do the boots on the ground work ahead of time and really learn what worked and what didn't for both the clients and the firm. So I really feel like it's given me an advantage in going solo because I knew the do's and don'ts that I wanted to put into practice. I'm a mother of 2 adult children. One is a college grad, is pursuing her postgraduate, and my son is graduating this year as well. So I'm on the other side of the fence, which gives me a lot of time to invest in my business. So it's a perfect time of life for me to be on this pathway.
That's amazing. Yeah. Can you tell me, are there any sort of insights or, is there anything that you think that your unusual sort of your unique unicorn approach to getting into law, is there anything that's sort of benefited you that maybe other lawyers in your field don't have that you have because you took that approach?
Absolutely. I think in really, I like the term unicorn, sort of the elusive one of a kind, right? But it really is a spirit of innovation. And I think that's what my background really gave me. As I said, having worked in the profession for a long time, you see new lawyers come out of law school, they pass the bar, and some have worked maybe in an intern position in a firm, some have never worked in a firm. So they've never filed a document in the courthouse. They don't really understand the rules, the procedures, right, of what needs to happen. And especially those that are excited to maybe try going solo for the first time, either because maybe it's a tough job market, they're not finding what they want in the area they want to practice. So they think they'll just go out on their own without really understanding that now you're crossing over into being a business owner, right? And I think that's what really trips up a lot of attorneys is they may be wonderful at being an attorney and thinking like a lawyer, which is what law school teaches you, but not really understanding the business side of law and how to balance both your duties to your clients and your duty to your business, right? So I think that I gained a lot of perspective that way by having been on that side of things. And, to be honest, seeing it not really done well sometimes, not having the business have really direction, not having really that concrete infrastructure that you need to grow a business. We talk about this a lot in the legal field where especially new solo attorneys that go out on their own do what we call sort of door law, right? Which is anything that comes to the door, I'll do it, right?
Right.
Because you're just trying to gain clients, you've got to pay rent, you want to get yourself paid, right? And so you end up becoming sort of a generalist. And I think one thing I've learned over time is that it's really tough to make it that way. If you're just sort of dependent on whatever comes in the door, you're not really going to be that effective at any one thing. And so I learned really early in my career, based on my background, that I needed to niche down to what I wanted to focus on and the kind of clients I wanted to serve. And I think as a business owner, that's really an important perspective that you need to come to, for sure.
Absolutely. And give me just one moment here. I just got a freaking thing on my thing that says your battery's about to run out and my computer's plugged in and I don't know why. This is kind of
no problem.
I'm dealing with gremlins over here. Good Lord. Hear that beep? That means it's back plugged in. I don't know what's going on here. This is the nonsense. Every day we deal with this nonsense.
Listen, as business owners, we know how to roll with the punches, right? Something's going to come up and start beeping at you anytime. You just have to be ready to deal with it.
Oh, well, I've got a split in the cable, like you get those splits in the Mac cables where you got to kink it just right to get it to do. It's
right.
Well, can you tell me a little bit about when people come to Allums Law, what are some of the pain points and problems that they're experiencing that you're helping them solve?
Absolutely. So again, primarily we are focused in the estate planning world, which would be preparation of wills, trusts, powers of attorney, handling after death administration, and handling probate. So there's a couple of different areas of pain points. Now, when we're talking about the probate and the post-death, of course, you're dealing with a loss. So there's an immediate, emotional component to that. And then the lack of understanding and awareness of the system, right? Especially in California, probate is a real beast. We try to avoid it at all costs. It's long, it's expensive, there's a lot of court oversight, and it's really overwhelming for those family members or the individuals that are left behind to sort of clean this up. Oftentimes we find that people just don't do the planning, right? And so that even leads us to the pain on the other side. They don't do their planning because maybe lack of awareness, maybe concern about cost. A lot of times they just don't want to face their mortality and have to make those hard decisions.
Right.
Often in my practice, I see, families coming in with, a difficult story within their family. Maybe there's an estrangement. Maybe there's someone that they're worried about with. Maybe there's an addiction issue. Maybe a relationship with an in-law that is not good. Maybe there's just financial struggles and they're not quite sure how to balance any of this. So the biggest pain point is, one, you don't know what you don't know and how detrimental it is to not do the planning. But two, it just can be a real challenge to have to tackle things like talking about your death or your incapacity. And that's where a lot of people really fail to do some good planning.
Right. And what does it look like? I mean, when people do fail to do that good planning, what does that look like?
Sure. So there's a couple of different things. And I always tell my clients, when we're talking about estate planning in particular, we're really coming at it with the two lenses, right? One is what happens when we've died and how is that going to be handled? How does what I've built or created get to the people I want it to get to? But the other part where there really is a lack of planning is what happens if I'm still living and I haven't made any arrangements for who will make decisions for me when I'm no longer able. And we're living longer, not always healthier. So it's really important that we think about that. Now, the failure to plan there, if it's in that lens of what happens if we do no planning and then we've died, well, it's going to depend on a couple of things, right? Do we co-own property with others? Well, then that might be fairly simple because you have a co-owner who will simply continue to own property. Do we have some beneficiaries named? Again, fairly simple. Beneficiaries will receive it. But when we don't have either of those things, either, an unmarried person or the first spouse has already passed away, and we don't have those tools, then we end up usually in a probate court type situation. Right. If you've done no planning, you have no will at all, the court's going to make a lot of decisions for you. The court will decide who gets to be in charge of this estate, and the court will decide who's going to receive the benefit from that estate. And then you have to move through that long and expensive process for that result. If you've done minimal planning, maybe you created a will, all you're really doing in changing the structure of that plan is telling the court who's in charge and what you want, but the process is the same. So we haven't really taken too much pain away from those people involved. And on the other side, when we're talking about what if we're incapacitated and we can't make our own decisions and we failed to make plans there, and those plans would look like creating a durable power of attorney, right? Who's going to manage my finances if I can't? Making an advance healthcare directive. That's a really critical one. Who's going to make my medical and personal decisions if I'm not able? So if we fail to do that, generally, especially here in Southern California, you're going to end up in something called a conservatorship. Most people are familiar with the Free Britney times a few years back, right? The big refrain. And I don't know that a lot of people understood what we were trying to free Britney from, but it was a conservatorship. And that's basically a court-ordered power of attorney. If I haven't created one and said, I want Adrian to be in charge of making my decisions when I'm incapacitated and not able, if I've not made that appointment, then the only way to do that after I no longer have that capacity is with a court order. And that's essentially what conservatorship is. Again, and it's long, it's expensive, and there is a lot of involvement then of the court in your life. So those are the difficulties if you fail to plan, is that you've left all of those decisions now likely to a court, and you've also put a lot of burden for time and expense on the people that you probably wanted to select in the first place. Right? Yeah.
So bear with me here. I have a two-part question.
Okay.
2 parts. The first being, what are some common mistakes that people make when it comes to estate planning? And the second part is, what are some common misconceptions that people have when it comes to estate planning?
Two excellent questions. So common mistakes that we see would be obviously failing to plan. So we'll just take that off the table, right? One would be a lot of especially elders will think it's really simple to just, maybe they have 1 or 2 children. That's who's going to receive everything. And they just want to start adding them onto things, right? Adding them on the title of their home, adding them onto their bank accounts. That is a terrible mistake. It's really risky because one, there are some tax benefits to inheriting property versus being gifted property that you take away from your children. Number 2, and the biggest one is you are now exposed to any risk that your child experiences. So they get in an accident, they get a lawsuit filed against them and a judgment is awarded. Guess whose house is now exposed to a lien for that judgment, right? That's really a difficult spot for the parent to be in. And there's things that those adult children don't consider, like trying to qualify their children for maybe college, financial aid, loans. And now suddenly your asset picture looks very different, even though these aren't really your assets. You also want to guard against the parents that say, I'll just take the one kid who helps me, right? I've got 5 kids, but one is here and they help me. I'll put them on the account. Well, now you've just said that if I die, that account belongs to that kid. That is now a whole different ballgame. Are they going to, what I always hear, do the right thing? I don't really know what the right thing is for you, Adrian. Might be different than for me. But that kid now has tax obligations and things if they start giving that money away. So just adding people onto things, not a great idea. That's a difficult spot. The other thing is, if you do some planning, is failing to maintain your plan or to properly fully invest your time in making sure that plan is going to work. So for example, we create a revocable living trust for you to avoid probate, to make all these great decisions, to control the distribution, and then you fail to actually move your assets into your trust, right? That's a critical misstep that people make. And more often we see this made when they try to sort of maybe DIY some of this, or kind of, again, go with maybe a very low budget option where they're not getting proper advice or that follow-up care that we can provide as attorneys, that they miss those important elements to make sure this, even though you've made a right step, you haven't done it correctly. So now it's still going to result in more pain points after your death. So I would say those are the 2 biggest, I think, problems that we see. For the misconceptions, the biggest one is that estate planning is for rich people, right? You hear the word estate and people think, oh, an estate, it's a grand, I have a mansion and I've got all these assets and millions of dollars. And no, an estate is really just whatever you've built up. You could have, $100 in the bank and that's still your estate, right? So again, estate planning is not just for wealthy, it's for everyone. So it's important that everyone has a power of attorney and a healthcare directive, and maybe even a basic basic will. Does everybody need a trust? Not necessarily. And that's going to be really state specific. That's going to be asset specific. So there are levels of estate planning, but there is a small level that really every adult person needs to have. So that's one of the biggest misconceptions. And then I think because there are so many tools out there that people think, DIY, I'm a smart person, I can just kind of, Google lawyer my way out of this. And that's a challenge as well, because you don't know what you don't know. If you don't know what to ask, how do you know if you're getting the right advice? So just because you said, oh, my neighbor has a trust, I should have a trust. Maybe not.
Right.
I wouldn't know, but I can ask you questions about your family structure, about your goals, right? One of the things I like to ask when we're doing some planning, and I know there's several attorneys I think that think this way, is you need to think about in estate planning, who do you love, right? That you're going to want to maybe set something aside for.
Right.
Who do you worry about that maybe we need to make special plans for? Who depends on you that you're maybe already helping and we need to continue that? And then what kind of legacy do you want to leave? So even when you don't have, let's say, a lot of value in your assets, like monetarily, that doesn't mean that there's not a legacy that you can leave to your loved ones, for sure.
Right. Well, and I'm curious, is it when people come to Allums Law, is it sort of is your strategy and your approach sort of a one size fits all, or is it very custom tailored to the individual client?
Yeah, thank you for asking that. It actually is going to be fairly customized. Now, there's a certain aspect of estate planning that's going to be consistent for almost every client, right? Most trusts in California are going to have a certain structure. There's certain language that has to be included. So there's going to be some of what we call that boilerplate, right? Because of the kind of solution we've come up with. But then there needs to be a lot of customization. And I think that's where people don't realize that they have a lot of control. We might have one child that you want to leave something to that is, could take over your portfolio today and make more money than you could and can be trusted. And then another child maybe who has special needs and is receiving public benefits. And we have to do some real careful planning there. Maybe another with substance abuse that we say, oh my gosh, we really want to protect them and leave something. We don't want to disinherit them, but how do we do that? So we really spend a lot of time on those 4 questions and on looking at your family structure. And I'll tell people all the time, I'm not just going to say, oh, everybody needs a trust, because that's not necessarily right, or that everybody needs this kind of trust. So it's important that we do customize. For us at Allums Law, it's really important that we educate our clients. That's one of our core values, is just making sure that the clients, that we are clear and consistent and educating along the way.
Right.
So, I don't expect you, Adrian, if you don't do this for a living, to understand the terminology, to understand all the options. Right. But if you're my client, I do want you to understand as much as possible, because it's your plan. I'm here to be your guide. I'm here to help you achieve the goal that you want and solve those pain points. But it's your plan, and you're responsible for making sure it runs right once you've left my office. And the only way to do that is if I make sure that I'm educating you the whole way through and then checking up on you. So for us, it is about customization, education, and then that nurturing. We want to make sure we stay connected to those clients.
Right. Well, it sounds like there's a fairly lengthy, and I'd love to dive into a little bit more, but it sounds like there's a fairly lengthy discovery phase. Can you tell us a little bit about what that looks like? You've mentioned some of the questions that you asked, but can we dive in a little bit more there?
Sure, absolutely. So for us, we generally start with a little bit of intake. So we get to know a little bit about you and some education at the outset, where we're explaining sort of some of these concepts to you at a high level. And then we have a consultation and design meeting. And that's a pretty extensive meeting with myself and the clients. And we really dive into, again, what are your specific areas of concern? How does your family makeup look? What are the worries that you have? And then what are some solutions that I can offer? And in those conversations, it's so important, because it will usually spark something that the client didn't think about, right? Because many of them, I think, and one of the misconceptions is that these are sort of cookie cutter things that we just search and replace the names and now here's your estate plan, right? And it's absolutely not that. Each plan is going to come out differently based on what you share with me. And sometimes it's multiple meetings, right? We may have very complex family relationships or financial situations where we really need to have a lot of conversation about that, and make sure that it fits. And I'll have some clients that are really invested in very specific concerns. And so again, we're going to take the time that it needs to fully vet that, make sure we've talked about it, what are your options, and make sure we build some plans that feel right for you and that we also know are going to stand up legally for you as well, right? Yeah.
So you mentioned that the firm was started in 2020.
Mm-hmm.
So, right, I mean, I'm just doing some thinking on years, right? So,
Yep.
right as you were getting things started and the ball rolling, the pandemic hit. Can you speak
I
a little bit
actually
about
opened
that?
March of 2020. So I and the pandemic hit the ground running at the same time, I guess, essentially. What's unique for me in that way is, again, because of my background, I had been with a firm for over 20 years. The attorney in that firm retired just as I was coming on board. And I actually was able to inherit most of those clients who I had worked with in that paralegal capacity. So that was wonderful. I was able to touch base with some of them. But as you can imagine, in estate planning, there was a lot of concern, and our area of law was really, really critical, especially in those healthcare directives, powers of attorney, because people were ill, and we had to make sure that we had some plans. So I hit the ground running, almost fully remotely. I mean, we had every COVID protocol, all the things in the office, and we were able to just serve clients just immediately, hundreds of clients in that first year. And I think it was so important that we were flexible, that we, really adapted the business as everyone did. And that, again, is something I think was born out of that innovative spirit coming into building my firm as I did.
Right.
Is when I was preparing to launch the firm. Once I passed the bar, I knew this was the direction. I spent quite a bit of time working with the Bar Association, with our tech advisors, with others to really build that business model so it could be agile, which was perfect because we were able to deploy that right away. So our technology, the efficiencies that we built in, the communication methods, all of that was able to be inserted and used. And so the clients, I mean, it never skipped a beat, which was really wonderful. Yeah.
Well, and, just to go off of that a little bit, tech kind of, emerging tech and Zoom meetings and everything kind of allowed you to do everything remotely during that period of time.
Yeah.
The big conversation in tech right now that everybody's, AI.
Yeah.
Do you foresee AI impacting your legal field at all?
Absolutely. And it's interesting. I belong to a sort of a mastermind community that discusses this quite a bit. And really, I think what it's about, and some great thought leaders in this area that are discussing, is not that in our area that AI will replace us, but that AI will really enable us to do our jobs in a much more efficient way and to really, capitalize on the tool. It was interesting. Someone likened the example today, another author, to, back in the early days, we had people whose jobs it was to go out with, oil and light the oil lamps, in the streets. So we had light. And then electricity came and those jobs went away, but the people didn't go away. They just learned new skills. And I think that's what's happening here, is that if we can harness the AI tools, we can give more value to our client and the efficiencies and things we create. I think it's nerve-wracking for people in the industry who maybe are in sort of an older mindset, right? The billable hour has been king in law for, as long as you can remember. And I've never subscribed to that. Again, the community that I belong to, I think, is pretty forward thinking about alternative fees. So my firm runs exclusively on flat fees. Of course, for probate, it's statutory fees set by the court. We rarely will do an hourly rate fee because really the value of my service is not just buying time. It's really in solving problems. And those problems are solved with the decades of experience that I have in this field and the expertise I continue to gain and the tools I can employ. So billing at an hourly rate, I think, is a bit reductive to, you're buying time for dollars instead of the value is in the solution I'm offering. So to provide that service in a flat rate model, allows me to continue to breed efficiencies on my side, allows my clients to really plan well in budgeting, because again, it can be an investment in estate planning. So to take away that pain point, they know exactly what to expect. So I think for attorneys who can really leverage these tools, again, it may remove some of those more menial tasks that maybe you've had research attorneys doing, because the AI tools can summarize research. I mean, seems like a nanosecond, right?
Right.
And give you information and give you some, just tools that you can then take and use your skills as a lawyer to go through then and move forward with that in a much more efficient way. So I absolutely think it's changing the practice of law in the way that it's allowing lawyers, again, to take away some of those very lengthy, time-consuming processes and focus our time on solving problems, right? Where that's a human skill that we need to still address and use. I don't think it's going to drive all of the lawyers out of business, right? I think there may be some that fear that. It's really about harnessing those tools and watching that next evolution of technology, and how do we use that and leverage it to serve our clients even better? That's really the trick.
Yeah. So we've spoken a bit about your practice. I'd love to speak a little bit more about you. What was the moment where you realized or knew, hey, I'm going to go off? I mean, you mentioned you have 20 years of experience working in the field before you went off on your own. Was there a moment where you knew, I'm going to go do this and branch out and make my own firm?
I think so. And I think it was fairly early on. I mean, I did have that sort of tug of war with myself. Do I go get, quote unquote job, right? Work for another attorney, which again, I had done that for a number of years. That was okay with me. But I think I just had such a different vision for how I wanted my firm to be run and the way I wanted to serve the clients, the kind of personal connections that I wanted to make, that really led itself to me thinking the best way to do that is under my own power, right? I was fortunate, as I said, to sort of start off with a little bit of a book of business that allowed me to, again, have those touch points with clients who knew me. My reputation in the area was already strong. I spent a lot of time when I was working in that paralegal role as a mom, building up all of my connections within the community as well. So my name was out there. People knew my reputation. And so knowing that, I felt really confident that I could come out. And I knew the do's and don'ts, that as long as I was willing to put in the work, that would be successful for me. So I think that was a turning point that happened. I would say I was having that conversation with myself at the time I took the bar, and shortly thereafter, once I passed, just trying to decide, do I want the steady paycheck or do I want the opportunity to innovate and build a legacy? And that's really what drew me to it. Yeah.
Now, you also mentioned that you have 2 children. Is that right? You have 2 adult children. I believe that's what you said.
Correct.
Yeah. Do you think that being a parent gives you an insight into estate planning that maybe others in the industry that aren't parents don't have?
Sure. I mean, I think there's value in the life experience that each of us brings to this. And I think part of my life experience that makes me a good counselor at law is, one, having been a parent, being part of a large family that is made up of people from all walks of life, folks who have suffered from mental illnesses, disabilities, folks that have been successful and had a lot of income, folks that have struggled on their path, maybe with other issues, and then being part of sort of that sandwich generation. And I'm 50 now, and so I've got parents that are aging up and needing more help. And so I'm sort of seeing all of that across the board. And I think being able to bring that part of me to my job is really important. That's really what the basis is, again, connecting with the clients and being able to share not only my legal experience, but life experience in helping to formulate plans and guide them. And being a mom actually is one thing. We just are launching a sort of adjacent business right now, serving young people, young adults. I have a partner, Allison Harrison, with Allums Law Group in Ohio. She and I met through our mastermind coaching community, and both of us had a real heart and passion for helping young adults understand what law looks like for them as they come out into the world, right? My kids going off into college, one stayed close to home, one went a little further away, and I would get calls, right? This is happening. What do we do? You know, my son's calling saying, well, how do I deal with the landlord? And I don't know how to make a lease. And all of these things started coming up. And Allison and I had some great conversations around, you know, how do we continue to help support these young adults with some autonomy, but teaching them the importance of taking those steps as legal adults to protect themselves. So this estate planning goes all the way down to those 18-year-olds, right? Needing a power of attorney, needing a healthcare directive. So we formed a company called Safe Sendoff. And it is focused on not only providing, it's a bit of a DIY type platform for these young adults to be able to go out and build these two critically important legal documents. But it's also, again, focused on that primary goal that both she and I share, which is education. So we also offer an Adulting 101 webinar for these kids they can understand, how does the law treat me once I'm 18? What kind of decisions am I able to make? How are my parents or loved ones or guardians now excluded from decision making unless I bring them in? And I think that's an educational piece for parents as well. And in that parent position, I've been there where you realize, oh my gosh, I can't get information about my kid who's, 4 states away and has gone into the hospital, they're sick, and they won't tell me anything because now I have no legal right? We have all these protections. So we really had this drive to empower and educate young adults. And we really wanted it to be focused on them because as a parent, again, you want to grow them, you want to help them launch and fly, and you have this pull to still want to guide and keep those bumpers on, and yet you really still want to empower them to make those next steps. Right. So Safe Sendoff is a really great tool because the parents can also come on and become educated. Often they're the drivers of saying to the kiddo, you got to get this done before you go away. What if something happens? You need me and I can't help you. That's important. And we definitely want to speak to that for the parents, but also our focus is now putting that responsibility on the child. Let us teach them how they get to make those decisions and why they're important. So it's not just a tool where, again, you just pop in your name and address and you just get a form. We have video content, explainers, education the whole way through because the goal, again, is empowerment. And that's my goal at my firm as well, right? Empowering both those young adults, our everyday folks of every age, and our seniors who now the burden of care for them switches, right? And the need for someone to support them and for them to be able to continue having their independence is just as important. But Safe Sendoff was born out of that desire as a parent to really see that those kids were off to adulthood in a safe way with the backup support they need, but only when they actually need it and not the helicopter mode that some of us get pulled into, right?
I wish I would have been around when I was 18. Dang.
Right? Listen, tell every 18-year-old, and so for some people, their parent is not a safe person to be their safety person, their emergency person anymore. And that's another tool why we want to educate these young adults is that you don't have to continue to choose a person if that's not a safe choice for you as well. Right. But it's all about understanding. It's all about education. Do they understand that even though they have the right to get married now, if they wanted to go off to Vegas with their college sweetheart, that they also would be required to potentially pay alimony or child support, even if they're only 18 or 19 years old. So really about educating them, not fear mongering, but teaching. That's really the goal. Yeah.
You're also pretty heavily involved in your community. Can you speak a little bit about your community involvement?
Sure, I would love to. So early on, as I said, when my kids were younger, I was heavily involved through their PTA resources and into high school, got very involved with the senior grad night program. And that was intended, again, to keep kids safe on graduation night, which statistically has a very high accident and sometimes fatality rate for kids who go out and attend parties and are unsafe. And so in order to combat that on graduation night, we host an amazing carnival type event for the kids where they can and have that last hurrah with their high school class in a safe and secure and sober way. And that was a wonderful thing to be a part of for over 5 years as my kids were coming up through high school. Even for classes of kids that weren't mine, I was just really passionate about it. Now that they've sort of gone beyond that, while we still support those programs, of course, because we have this passion to help young adults, I've really shifted more into leadership for lawyers. And so we do some work with the Wills for Heroes program, which in San Diego County Bar Association puts on annually, which allows first responders to have a no-cost will and power of attorney package made. So again, those critical documents. That's especially important for those young first responders that are just getting out in the workforce, or maybe they're still paying off student loans and they haven't really acquired assets to need a full estate plan, but everybody needs those critical documents. So Wills for Heroes is a really wonderful program. And then I've been heavily involved in the last 3 years with the San Diego County Bar's education and committee, and specifically with the Leadership Academy, which was born just a few years ago. And the Leadership Academy's purpose is to equip lawyers as leaders in the community and beyond. So it's a 6-month intensive. Attorneys from around San Diego County can apply. It's a fairly rigorous application process, but the idea is that they then participate in this intensive where they are taught everything from the deep leadership skills, self-leadership, empathy, compassion, communication skills, all the way to the more practical skill sets of team building, managing conflicts, and mindset. So we really have worked hard to develop a curriculum that supports the other part of leadership that isn't sort of just the documents and the accountability, right? We want to really dive into what does it take to be a great leader? And we think that lawyers are uniquely positioned for this in many areas, right? In nonprofit boards and in municipal boards, things like that, areas where they can serve because of their law background, their understanding and deep thinking as a lawyer and problem solving. And now if we can marry that with those both internal and external leadership skills, we think that's a tremendous asset. So I've been really proud to serve currently as vice chair of that committee and working on that curriculum. Leadership is a passion of mine for both the young people and now for the the adults in the room as well. I think it's a wonderful service. So it's been something I'm really excited to be part of.
Well, Rachel, this has been an awesome conversation. If anybody out there listening could use your help, could use the help of Allums Law, where can the people find you?
Absolutely. So it's pretty simple. www.allums.law. That's me, and you'll find us there. We have a wonderful, robust website with a lot of resources. We'd love to have you visit and then reach out to us if you're in San Diego County specifically for estate planning, but California statewide for any administration or probate. And of course, if you have a young adult in your life, we'd love for you to check out www.safesendoff.com. And that's SAFESENDOFF. Just like it sounds. And you will find, again, some great tools and resources to either help explain to, or if you are the young adult, dive into and really understand your rights and responsibilities and be empowered in that domain as well.
Well, Rachel, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was awesome.
Been my pleasure, Adrian. Thanks for having me.
And thank you, everyone, for listening. This has been Partnerships for Profit, presented by LeDuc Entertainment. Rachel, thank you again.
Awesome. Thanks.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Partnerships for Profit. We hope you've gained valuable insights on how to form profitable partnerships and take your business to the next level. Be sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. Got a partnership story to share or someone you'd like to see featured on the show? Reach out to us. Until next time, keep building those partnerships for profit.